My name is Tom Sear from UNSW Canberra Cyber at the Australian Defence Force Academy. I come to you today physically from the bottom of this orb and from within an unknown data centre. We are joined in our shared psycho-sociospheric Anthropocene through the geopolitics of data packet switching through an architectronics of submarine cables. The spherological is the imaginary of the internet, the whole Earth catalogue being the manual for the Californian counterculture. The notion of a blue orb suspended in black space symbolised the digital utopia of the internet pioneers. A time in San Francisco that Hunter S. Thompson described as, quote, riding the crest of a high and beautiful wave. Now, Sloterdijk suggests we are dealing with, quote, losing the cosmic periphery. The orb is dead. Data now defines sovereignty and geography. Data is sovereign property in what Benjamin Bratton describes as multipolar hemispheres framed within specific stacks. This, he argues, is a new nomos of the Earth. In this conception, infrastructure and platform intersect with international, corporate and national sovereignty in a planetary scale computation operating within an accidental megastructure, which is also the new sovereignty design. What this means for the global orb is the emergence of mitosis of stack genre in multipolar hemispherical stacks. The geographic scope of procedural integration of data as sovereign substance, he argues, is a territorial innovation. Bratton suggests that the first Sino-Google War of 2009 is the first case of a new kind of geopolitical governance. Quote, one, the CCP sees the internet as an extension of the body of the state, and another, Google, sees the internet as a living, quasi-autonomous, trans-territorial civil society. Bratton suggests that these stacks are a new form of Schmittian nomos. Indeed, Gabriel de Sata has termed the Chinese version after Bratton as the red stack. The Chinese red stack, contained within the great firewall of Baidu, Alibaba and Tencent, together known as BAT or BAT, is one focus for this talk. In 2011, one of the main designers of the Great Firewall expressed concern that despite the first Sino-Google War of 2009, that Google was still potentially accessible in China. Quote, it's like the relationship between riverbed and water. Water has no nationality, but riverbeds are sovereign entities. We cannot allow polluted water from other nation states to enter our country. In 2015, the metaphor remained liquid but oceanic. In a keynote speech at the 8th China-US Internet Industry Forum by Lu Wei, Minister of the State's Council Cyberspace Administration of China, told the traditional Chinese parable of two people 2,500 years ago on a boat well out to sea who squabbled and quarrelled until, in the midst of a sudden storm, the need for cooperation to get the sail down and prevent capsizing led to smooth sailing. Quote, now 2,500 years have passed and people are faced with a cyberspace as vast as the sea and information revolutionary waves as tumultuous as sea waves. In 2010, via a State Council Information Office white paper called The Internet in China, Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech at the opening ceremony of the Second World Internet Conference in Wuzhen, where he emphasised this concept of internet sovereignty, or wangluo zhuquan. The phrase, which could be translated as internet or cyber, wangluo, and sovereignty, zhuquan. As Betts and Stevens argue, the internet does not challenge the international legal sovereignty of states, but does have implications for state sovereignty through the capacity to control cross-border data flows. While there is an emerging academic debate on what the term means, by way of gross simplification, the key principle of the proposal is to seek international norms as a means to control cross-border data flow, to assert domestic authority within territorial borders. The CCP's central goal is to seek to ensure that the domestic social management of information is thereby legitimised by a key tenet of inviolable national sovereignty, where states should normatively have a strong, clear role in determining global internet policy. But as Jinghang Zhen, Tim Stevens and Yahoo Chen discuss, there is debate within China on how to best define network borders in respect to internet sovereignty. Two views are interpretations of the Talon Manual. The first, that the geographic locations of cyber infrastructure determine where network borders lie. The second, quote, non-physical network frontiers, unquote, including such domain addresses like .cn, are sovereign territory. The third uses levels of network access to define borders similar to maritime delimitation, so maritime, international and exclusive waters. The work of my colleague Rob McLaughlin points out that applying the definition of the intangible in the Talon Manual in this way has complications because in the Talon Manual 2.0, Rule 100, it states that, quote, an attack on data per se does not qualify as an attack under the law of armed conflict, unquote. The manual notes, quote, the majority of international group of experts agreed that the law of armed conflict, the notion of object, is not to be interpreted as including data, at least in the current state of the law. In the view of these experts, data is intangible and does not fall within the, quote, ordinary meaning of the term object. Therefore, an attack on data per se does not qualify as an attack, unquote. The data within the red stack includes an integrated digital system with 751 million people using native apps like Tencent, Alibaba and Baidu, Youku Tuda, which is a YouTube, Sina Weibo, which is a form of Twitter, Renren like Facebook, WeChat like WhatsApp, Ctrip like Orbitz, and Zhihu like Quora. Indeed, traffic is monitored and censored within this ecosystem, as of course Alibaba and Tencent manage the now famous Sesame Credit Scheme, which is a person's economic and political conformity score. These systems are supposedly protected behind the Golden Shield project, a subsection of which is known in the West as the Great Firewall, which is a system of preventing IP addresses routing at proxy servers at the 6 internet gateways. Selective DNS cache poisoning also occurs at these 6 gateways of international traffic between China and the rest of the world. Indeed, China is also deploying facial recognition and smartphone tracking technologies via AI on this relatively closed and yet accessible data system. On April 20, 2018, at his speech at the National Cybersecurity and Information Work Conference, Xi Jinping stressed that without cybersecurity, there is no national security. Development and security go together like, quote, 2 wings of a bird and 2 wheels of an engine. Professor Greg Austin at UNSW Canberra Cyber has observed in his new book, Cybersecurity in China, that the foundation of its defences, including in the Ministry of Public Security, remain weak. Cybersecurity is a sociological system or a social technical system and is undermined from both sides of this equation. Firewall circumvention technologies, for example, exist, and even VPN blocking cannot be completely consistent without blocking all other data flows. Netizens exploit Mandarin homophones to evade internal censors. Here lies the profound instability paradox at the heart of internet sovereignty. As John R. Lindsay argues, the internet is an economic institution where nation states, quote, must cooperate to compete. Chinese economic and financial entanglement ensure that complete blocking of data is impossible based upon the shared design of the internet, where consistent incentives to openness remain. China and the United States are thus engaged in, as he describes, quote, chronic and ambiguous intelligence-counterintelligence contests across their networks, even as the internet facilitates productive exchange between them. China and the US are involved in a geostrategic technology competition. AI, quantum computing and biotech will be central to future warfare. Just as there is a BAT versus GAFA stack-on-stack conflict over access to hemispherical data archives for future machine learning. The United States currently has information dominance, and China is developing asymmetric capabilities to neutralise the traditional strengths of the United States in technology. The state of great power competition is well accepted in defence and security circles. Internet sovereignties are maintained and undermined through data flows across borders of stacks. However, I wish to explore also how this is a cosmotechnical conflict. China has since 1919 undertaken accelerationist-style episteme of modernisations to, as Chairman Mao said in 1957, quote, catch up with the UK and outstrip the US. But what does it mean philosophically to modernise in China? Is there a form of Chinese technicity? How could Chinese philosophy think technology? During Mao Zedong's rise to power, Heidegger wrote in one of his black notebooks on the question of technology in China, stating, quote, if communism in China should come to rule, then one can assume that only in this way does China become free for technology. What is this process? Philosopher Hu Yu read this passage and asked, what does Heidegger mean by not free for technology? How might it be possible to liberate Eastern philosophy of technology and liberate it from a marginalisation by Western metaphysics of technology and see it from a new standpoint? Hu Yu ponders, if technics is not anthropologically universal, then culture is always affected by each culture's cosmological understanding. Then technics is also cosmotechnics. It is this approach that we also need to consider in relation to the question of China and technology, China and technical objects, or data. Is it possible that the meta-conflict is not between superpowers or a Sino-Google war, but instead the expression of the frictions between two cosmotechnical hemispherical logics? Thank you.